by and large, this is helping, Donald Trump's Buy America policy.
Carney's announcement here is blowing up in his face. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today, Mark Carney is having to answer for his actions here, offering up $5,000 EV subsidies to Canadians who essentially would be buying American cars because most of the cars made in Canada are not EVs, thus supporting Donald Trump and the Americans. Let's jump into this. Starting this one off from Bloomberg, it says New Brunswick, an East Coast Canadian province of about 900,000 people, will no longer use billionaire Elon Musk's social platform X for routine government communications, its leader has announced. This is embarrassing. If she doesn't want to use it, then just don't use it. But announcing it just isn't completely embarrassing. In a post on X and Facebook, Premier Susan Holt cited the platform's recent history, including reports of harmful content and inadequate safeguards, eroded trust that it can be used in a way that aligns with our values and obligations to New Brunswickers. This is ridiculous. She's talking about the AI stuff. It's all been fixed. You can't put anyone in a bathing suit. You can't put anyone even remotely in a bathing suit anymore. That was on there for like 3 days. And not only that, it was on other platforms too. It's on Google Gemini, ChatGPT. It's the same thing. Moving ahead here, we've got Danielle Smith giving her 2 cents here on Mark Carney's new EV mandate. We'll transition into a much bigger segment talking about all this stuff. She's saying requiring 60% of new cars sold in Canada with zero emissions by 2030 and 100% by 2035 was always unrealistic and bad policy. And then she goes on to say if 60% of last year's sales had been zero emission, we would be 85% short. The EV mandate would have raised costs, removed consumer choice, and hurt Canada's automotive sector while doing nothing to reduce global emissions. She goes on to say here, we support consumer choice. If the federal government wants to promote EV sales, it must incentivize, not mandatory mandates, as Ottawa develops a new automotive strategy. But I mean, they're using our money to try to get people to buy these things. It's ridiculous. It's a waste of money. It's not helping anything. We've got cost of living crisis. And once again, the Liberals wasting our money.
Dennis, I can almost feel the massage in my lower back.
While the RCMP won't let the Prime Minister drive, Mark Carney is promising fresh rebates to get more electric vehicles on the road. Force all cars sold in Canada by 2035 to be EVs. The mandate replaced with targets, 75% by 2035, 90% by 2045, alongside yet to be announced environmental protections.
Will drive down emissions by more than doubling the stringency of Canada's vehicle GHG standards.
The rebates will also apply to American cars, despite Donald Trump's stated goal of moving Canadian auto jobs to the U.S.
Canadian taxpayers.
It's almost like Mark Carney is working to help America. How many times have I said that on this channel?
To not be forced to subsidize American-built vehicles that should have been produced in Canada.
Chinese EVs that will soon be allowed into Canada aren't eligible.
It's a choice by the Canadians.
But Canada's trade agreements with China were again used as a reason why the Trump administration won't remove tariffs.
Yeah, so Scott Bessent saying that once again, Canada's become an embarrassment.
Zero tariffs appear a no-go for the White House, though. Take a listen to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent after he was asked what would happen if Canada dropped all counter tariffs. Would the U.S., for example, follow suit?
Absolutely not. As we saw last week, 2 weeks ago, when Prime Minister Carney went to China, he lowered tariffs on Chinese EVs from 100% to 6%. U.S. has a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs. We couldn't let our northern border be used as a way for Chinese EVs to come into the U.S.
Despite Carney's diversification push, he still wants a tariff-free deal with the U.S.
The previous arrangements were more effective, and we're going to work hard to move back towards that.
$3 billion in cash, tax deductions, and $1.5 billion to expand the EV charging network also promised to avoid more auto layoffs.
I believe that the government would be propositional with some of these automakers to encourage them to continue to build in Canada.
Dropping the EV mandate, another signature Justin Trudeau policy that Mark Carney's walked away from, Donna, like the consumer carbon tax and the oil and gas emissions cap. Despite government officials telling Global News, Ottawa has no modeling on how Thursday's announcement will impact Canadian emissions.
Of course, because they don't care. This has nothing to do with the environment. What's interesting is early on in here, I didn't play it, but they mentioned some of the cars made in Canada.
Federal officials say that will apply to 11 makes and 20 models, including the Chrysler Pacifica and Dodge Charger, both built in Ontario.
Dodge Charger, the key thing to mention there is most of them have been canceled. Dodge Charger Daytona Banshee EV canceled, as well as the Dodge Challenger Daytona RT. The only one left is the Scat Pack EV, and the sales are abysmal. So what, we're going to have subsidies for a car that's barely anyone is buying? This is once again just going to benefit America. Mark Carney is not working for Canada. So Vasi brings on Kyle C back here, and he just is dropping the hammer. He speaks so well. He knows the topics. They're bringing it hard here, tying Carney to Trump.
I'm glad to be here again.
So I've done a series of interviews today in reaction to the auto strategy announcement. The union, Car Manufacturers Association, Car Parts Association. I can't find a single stakeholder who is unhappy with this. Why is your party?
Well, I think, first of all, I looked at those statements and it's pretty weak sauce. None of them are like bullish, like this is fantastic. But here's the problem. Right now, as you talked about, we have 10% tariffs on all vehicles that we export to the United States. And what is going to happen with this zero emission vehicle subsidy rebate is that American-made vehicles are actually going to be the primary beneficiary of these, because less than 5% of the vehicles we manufacture in Canada actually will qualify for this rebate. So it's really strange when the Americans are tariffing our vehicles and we are actually, in effect, subsidizing theirs. Like, imagine if you were a Brampton auto worker who was supposed to be building the Jeep Compass EV. And that was transferred to the United States, right? The production is going to be there. And the taxes that those workers paid into the system are going to be used to give subsidies for people that buy those vehicles. So look, I think if you're an auto worker in Canada, you're not very happy with this because so few are going to benefit from it.
So I'm certainly sympathetic, as you described, to the situation of somebody who, saw their job essentially transferred to the United States. My understanding of the policy going forward is that essentially the rebate would apply to countries that we do free trade with.
Correct.
If Canada were to say at this moment in time, ahead of a review of CUSMA, hey, by the way, it's every one of those countries except you, the United States, how do you think that would play out?
Well, look, I don't know that that's what's going to happen. But what we do know right now is we make about 1.3 million vehicles in Canada, and those are predominantly internal combustion engine vehicles. A very small slice of that are EVs. So the predominant winners in this are going to be the Americans who produce the EVs that we buy, or other foreign companies that produce those. So why didn't they come up with a policy that would benefit all auto workers, like what we've talked about, taking the HST off of all Canadian-made vehicles? That would actually be a much bigger rebate for all vehicles than the $2,500 or the $5,000, and it would actually secure auto workers' jobs. I found it really interesting that the Prime Minister didn't announce this at an auto assembly plant. He certainly didn't go to the Brampton plant to talk about this. Why? Because he knows it's actually not very good news for most of the vehicles that we manufacture here in Canada.
So two things. First, one is this is about EVs, and I take your point on Canadian, the portion of the market that's made here in Canada. But there is an acknowledgement of that in the policy, insofar as the price cap that will apply to countries that we do have free trade agreements with will not apply to any of the vehicles made in Canada. Secondarily, the Prime Minister also announced today that they are looking at changing essentially the remission structure to allow for additional credits to go to automakers that make their cars, like for each car that they make here in Canada. Is that not more in line with what you're talking about? And does that not address the issues that you're raising?
Well, it's not. First of all, we just don't produce that many EVs in Canada. I don't have the exact number, but since we've been producing EVs in Canada, we've produced around 40,000 vehicles in total, EVs in Canada, that are bought and sold in Canada. So it's a very, very, very small number. So even if they're trying to add additional incentives, is that going to bring back the Brampton Compass plant to manufacture the Jeep Compass EV? No, it's not, because we've heard nothing about that. Is it going to help the workers in all the other plants that are building internal combustion engines? No, it's not. Will it create enough incentives for the companies to make these kinds of investments? It certainly doesn't look like it. So again, it's going to primarily benefit, yes, a few vehicles that we produce in Canada, but by and large, this is helping, Donald Trump's Buy America policy, because we're going to be buying a lot more American EVs, which would make him very happy.
My point, though, about the remission changes or the changes to the structure of remission would not just apply to EVs. It's essentially a way to address the bigger problem that you identify, I think very rightly so, that, a lot of what we import comes from the United States, that we remain very reliant on it, and that what we're trying to do, if we're going to see the sector survive, is to, rev up the domestic market. The change in...
We've already tried to rev up the domestic market and it didn't work. The only thing that we really make, there's hardly any vehicles. That one Dodge Charger Scat Pack, which barely anyone buys. There's those teardrop vans that are driving around all over the place. They're commercial van. There's a very few vehicles. That one Chrysler. Why are we trying to bankrupt our economy for this EV nonsense? It's because Mark Carney and Brookfield want to make the money on it. Why would we destroy all of our lives to make them rich? This is absolute madness what's going on.
Credits, like allowing for additional credits to automakers that make more cars in Canada, isn't just for EVs.
Well, look, giving credits is one thing. But actually reducing the taxes so that you would be able to purchase more Canadian vehicles is a much more efficient use. So they're going to try and apply for some credits. I don't know how they're going to apply. I don't think the government has fully fleshed out how they're going to apply. But what we do know is that the Conservative position, which in fact we came up with in consultation with the auto union workers, is that taking the HST off of all Canadian-made vehicles would spur domestic supply, right? Spur domestic purchasing and would guarantee those jobs. We're hemorrhaging jobs in the auto sector. 5,000 jobs in the last little while, plus additional spin-offs. I haven't heard anyone, whether any of the auto unions, any of the Canadian vehicle manufacturers, saying that this is going to bring back any of these jobs.
I just look at policy after policy. They're not doing what's best for the people. It's very clear. Unfortunately, Canadians are not picking this up.
So the quote that I pulled from the union around the changes to the remission structure that I mentioned and the potential kind of, it's a really structural difference that it would entail from a trade agreement perspective, is that the government is giving itself an opportunity to explore all options, to expand its remission program and think strategically, about leveraging our vehicle market to secure long-term investments. This is a chance for Canada to be propositional in its demands of automakers and to get work back into our plants. So there, Lana Payne is directly drawing a link between those changes and the ability to bring workers back, contrary to what you just said.
Well, it could do that, right? But we don't know. What we do know is that the 10% tariffs that are in place by the United States is dramatically affecting our ability to export cars. Most cars that we manufacture in Canada actually get exported to the United States. There's been no progress on removing the tariffs that Donald Trump has imposed, and this will do nothing to remove those tariffs. So when we look at this, how is it actually going to create any of the jobs that you're talking about? It's going to mostly benefit American and foreign-made EVs. It's not going to do much with the internal combustion engine production, which is where 125,000 auto and auto-related workers work and build 1.3 million vehicles per year. There's a better plan. We outlined that better plan, which is to take the HST off of all Canadian-made vehicles. It's a level playing field for everyone. It's not complicated, and it's actually supported by the auto unions.
How do you even clap back against that? This guy's such a straight shooter, and that's what we should be doing. But of course, this is all about Mark Carney and Brookfield, the Brookfield Party of Canada. If we take a look at the sales in America of EVs and what they're selling here and the popularity, we've got all the different companies here: Porsche, Toyota, GMC, Subaru, Volvo are the ones with the biggest increases in their sales of EVs. Tesla's over here minus 9%, Mercedes-Benz minus 58%. Looking at the American market here, you can see this is from Q1 2015 over here to Q1 2025 last year, and we can see the dramatic increase in hybrid electric out of all the EVs. This is the biggest in demand. We've got battery electric, and then plug-in hybrid is the lowest. Looking at the prices in America and USD, the average price here is around $59,000 US for an EV, and the price fluctuating here almost up to $70,000 down to about $50,000. Being the EVs, this blue line on the top, dotted line is industry average, and subcompact cars on the bottom here, $23,000 US. Looking at the sales of EVs in America, we've got that here, market share January 2020 to March 2025, and you can see it's basically plateaued as of about January 2024, and it hasn't increased since. They're sitting at around 12%, 10%, which is about the same as in Canada, 10% of people buying EVs. And of that, the 11 states with the highest is Washington, Colorado, Oregon, Nevada, New Jersey, Hawaii. For a country like America, where they make a bunch of those EVs and Canada doesn't, and then Mark Carney offering subsidies, Canadian taxpayer money to essentially buy cars from America, how does not the entire auto industry be completely pissed off at Mark Carney for doing this?
You made 2 points, though, when you started off. Initially, it was being critical of of the idea that the Americans would benefit from this, right? And at the same time, you just said you haven't been able to remove those tariffs that exist in the first place. And again, I'll sort of circle back to where I started, which is if we said to everybody, hey, we're going to give these rebates to everyone but you, the United States, do you think that the White House would be more likely to remove the tariffs?
I don't know. It's hard to speculate if that's going to be the case. President Trump's very unpredictable. We know this. So going in with something that could be beneficial, it might not be. But what we go back to is why, as it's designed right now, when Donald Trump has put tariffs on Canadian vehicles, that is very clearly hurting our Canadian auto workers and Canadian auto production. Why would this have been designed to exclude them from the get-go? Like, why are most of these subsidies going to be used to purchase vehicles that are manufactured in the United States, including the Jeep Compass EV, which was supposed to be manufactured in Brampton? So,
do you really think explicitly the purpose of this was to just benefit the Americans? Like, I think that, wouldn't the unions and the car companies and all of them be saying that right now if that were the case?
Well, look,
I think Vassy should go on moosechart.com. This isn't to benefit the Americans as so much to benefit Carney and himself. Clearly, by her response there, she does not know what's going on.
I think that this is the unintended consequence of a very poorly thought out policy. I don't think they thought this through. In fact, I think the Chinese EVs that are coming in, 50,000 worth, right, tariff free, plus the subsidy
Not
of
tariff,
other
reduced tariffs,
the new subsidy.
The tariff is 6%. They might as well just say the number. It was dropped from, I believe, 100% tariff down to 6%.
Subsidies now. This is to shore up the Liberal Party's green base. It is not to actually help Canadian auto workers. The Liberals have moved more and more towards the Conservatives on every issue, and they're worried about losing support on their environmental flank. So these policies are designed to shore that up, but at the expense of Canadian auto workers. They could take the industrial carbon tax off to help auto workers as well. There's so many levers that they could do to do this, but instead they're doing something that I think primarily benefits themselves in keeping their base together and the people that want to buy EVs.
That's the truth of it. People aren't paying attention like, oh, okay, more environmental, eco-green. Yeah, great. The Liberals are doing great. Like, some people are just so easily brainwashed. They see a press conference here or there, and that's good enough for them.
One final question for you. If they were all about the environment and trying to shore up their environmental flank by this, wouldn't they have just kept the EV mandates? I mean, they took away one of their central emissions reductions planks in order to, in their view, and what the stakeholders were asking for, be a boon to the industry.
Well, look, I'm glad they finally came to the realization, which what Conservatives were saying, that the EV mandates were not enforceable. We'd never make them. They had to get there because all the auto manufacturers said we'll never get there. The charging network isn't there. The electricity capacity isn't there. The generating capacity isn't there. They saw the writing on the wall on that, so they came up with something else. But what I know for sure and for a fact is this is not going to repatriate a single Canadian auto worker's job. And in fact, I think it's going to have the opposite effect.
I lied. One more question I just thought of.
A good point you just mentioned there. Mark Carney announced beefing up our electricity grid, doubling it. They need that for these EVs to work. They're way behind the ball on this. That's partially why Carney's doing this. And then who's going to feed that power? It's going to be Brookfield with all their different companies they have providing this clean, green energy, and anything else that isn't clean and green, like all the oil and gas in Canada, will get a carbon tax on it. They'll have to pay carbon credits to equal their level of eco-greenness, which will get paid to Brookfield, boosting the value of the company. All this nonsense will boost Mark Carney's Brookfield Global Transition Fund 1, which directly boosts his carried interest, his incentive plan, notional long-term incentive plan, this one right here, in Brookfield Global Transition Fund, not to mention his shares in Stripes, his deferred stock options in Brookfield Corporation, and stock options in Brookfield Asset Management. This is nothing more than a plan for him to get rich. That's why none of this makes sense to Vassy, and it probably doesn't make a lot of sense to a lot of Canadians.
I was thinking, we were talking about GM. One of your colleagues, Jamil Javani, is in Washington right now. He says meeting with people in the White House as well as people in the State Department. Is that a visit that was sanctioned by the leader of your party, Mr. Poilievre?
I don't know the answer to that question, but what I will say is this. I'm glad someone's down there trying to get the tariffs taken off because we're getting no progress from the current government.
Do you think, though, like heading there on a trip that isn't in conjunction with the government at a time where Donald Trump clearly wants to leverage any weakness in the cohesion of this country is a good idea? I'm not.
Oh, please. We're getting nowhere with anything. Carney's not doing anything. Obviously, this is a great idea. I would even say it was a great idea if somebody from the NDP was good friends with JD Vance to go down there and try to talk to them and make a deal. That's how bad the situation is. This is not a good question. She's doing the whole bulldog bad cop thing. She can come up with something better than this. She could simply ask, are there risks to him going down there and talking with JD Vance versus trying to paint this narrative that this is going to destroy the whole relationship.
Taking away from what his motivation might be.
Sure.
But like, is that really the right thing to do?
I don't think it's weakness. Like, the Liberals constantly talk about we need all hands on board to try and deal with this. He has connections in the United States from his history. Using that to try and help the Canadian trade issue, I don't think can be a bad thing.
Okay, I'm going to leave it on that note. Mr. Subak.
We should not pay on anything made in Canada. It was taxed 3 times before it hits the shelf. Regardless of what happens to Canadians, I can tell the future to take this to the bank. The former chair of Brookfield will be cashing in nicely on that blind trust. Yep. Conservatives are the only party that will protect Canadian jobs. Isn't that the truth?